videos, but I went up to Brisbane and did like 72 hours trying to survive on Bitcoin. And it was a really fun experience, with people trying to figure out what Bitcoin is, because you walk into the shop and they're supposed to accept Bitcoin, but they don't help with Bitcoin. But it's a growing thing in terms of people coming in and figuring out what to do, and it's really cool to see actually that initiative happening in Brisbane and in 1770 up in Queensland. But overall, I'm just super excited about what's been going on here in Australia. You guys are really leading the way, and unfortunately over in New Zealand we're kind of a little behind the times, definitely behind what Australia is doing in terms of actually welcoming the crypto industry and taking a proactive role in making it happen here.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it? The fact that in Australia you can pay any bill with crypto for 4 years now with Living Room Satoshi. I think I've got 4 crypto debit cards in my wallet, so I can pay for anything I want at any shop with crypto, but yet people still have this idea that you can't spend Bitcoin anywhere, and when it goes up in price, everyone gets a bit excited, wants to accept Bitcoin, and by the time they get that infrastructure in place, we end up having a bit of a bear market, and then no one wants to spend their Bitcoin when it's low. So it's funny how these things happen, but it's continually growing in stages. So what did you like about EdCon today, Lark? Any highlights or best talks from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, EdCon, really cool to see the Ethereum community coming out, because there's really different kinds of conferences you can go to. There's a conference where you go to and it's the big money conference, right? It's ICO pitches, and you can't get 5 feet without someone trying to pitch an ICO to you, and that's the total opposite of what the Ethereum community conference is about. It's about people coming together and talking about like high-level chats about technology, and like when you see what's happening with Ethereum right now, it's a lot of people are saying, Ethereum, it's done, it's finished. Far from it. I mean, there's so many things going on, from ZK snarks that are going to scale Ethereum to layer 2 solutions, multiple layer 2 solutions, side chains, and Ethereum 2.0 is coming. So that was a big takeaway, and it's really cool to get to see Vitalik in person. Is exactly what I expected him to be in a kind of interesting way. So it's really awesome to see Vitalik and get to meet so many amazing people from the Ethereum community as well.
Any other questions, like, or anything you want to discuss, or should we just throw it straight to the audience for some Q&A? So throw your hand up, guys, and fire away.
Do you see with Bitcoin and privacy and the time taken to implement it as a hurdle that's going to probably allow Monero and Zcash and these other currencies to get in front of it?
Yeah, so the question's about Bitcoin and privacy. I think I did a video last year called The Biggest Headwind That No One Is Talking About, and it's the fact that Bitcoin and Ethereum both plan on going private in the next 12 to 24 months. And if the ecosystem's even better at that stage, I think there's going to be a lot of headaches with government and regulators once the biggest cryptocurrencies are private. So I've never really seen privacy coins as a good investment. I think they're really important for the ecosystem and for our mission. But the fact that we've already seen some countries or exchanges just go, no privacy coins anymore overnight, I think it's pretty dangerous to have this in the investment. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I actually asked Vitalik a relatively similar question today because right now with Ethereum, the conversation has been around using ZK snarks in order to provide scalability. But not a lot of people are talking about the privacy aspect of it, but that's something that can come inherently with that technology. But the reality is that we have seen conversations in France, far from actually being real legislation, conversations in France around banning privacy coins. Japan has looked at banning some, has actually, I think, banned some privacy coins in Japan. So it's problematic, but it's the old conversation that, when Bitcoin's outlawed, only outlaws will have Bitcoin, so I'm ready to be an outlaw, I think.
No other questions?
So I come from a banking background years ago, and I had to leave as a minority from the state. They used to send us out to 12 of these EFTPOS machines, which were free and all this sort of stuff, and now the banks are absolutely gouging small business with their fees on EFTPOS. Yep. But over the last couple of years, I haven't had anyone try and flog me as a small business owner a Bitcoin machine. Yep. Do you think that for us to get this mass adoption, we actually need the company to come on side and say, look, you know, this is what you need to do, and actually physically go out and log these machines for small business.
Yeah, so the question was about banks and merchant adoption and saving on fees, and I think that's one of the things that people don't realise when they use travel by bit and where you can spend your Bitcoin, is that the real incentive at the moment is for the merchant, because there's no 3% fee for using Visa or MasterCard, for example.
No chargebacks.
No chargebacks as well. But there's also a lot of other projects. I think you've spoken about PundiX a fair bit. So there's lots of people that are trying to roll out that terminal. And we've also got those sort of intermediaries, as I described, where you can use your card, but it's still a bit of a fee, I guess. But yeah, the real advantage is going to be, and it's not going to happen until Bitcoin reaches that larger price point, I think, and there's less volatility. So the next correction might be 50%, and then the next correction might be 30%, and then you can say, well, the US dollar goes up or down 30% in a given year, so can you really complain about the volatility of Bitcoin anymore?
It's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked that, because merchant adoption is, there's a couple different actual solutions in terms of devices. I mean, PundiX has a really slick looking device that literally can turn a cafe into a mini cryptocurrency exchange. But there's also a few other devices that are out on the market from companies like BitPay, where they've got basically simple Bitcoin terminals. But what we really need, more than just the companies getting the terminals, because this is exactly what happened in 1770 in Brisbane. Travel by Bits provided people with the payment solutions. Most companies have tablets already to run their point-of-sale terminals, but no one's coming in and spending their Bitcoin. No one's coming in and spending their cryptocurrencies. And there's a few equations that come down to this that we as a community kind of need to help incentivize these merchants. If you have a local merchant who accepts Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, go in and spend a little bit. And I know there's a lot of difficulties around taxation issues and around, going to having to spend and replace, right? But there's a few different ways. I mean, look at what MakerDAO is doing, right? You can actually lend your Ethereum out, get that DAI, play the long game on it potentially, especially in the bear market. It's a great situation to be doing, getting that Ethereum over collateralized and getting your DAI, and then you can go and spend that and not have to be losing your Ethereum or losing your Bitcoin. I think Nexo Finance, for example, lets you lend your Bitcoin out, so you can get these stable coins in return and then go spend them by using cryptocurrencies to incentivize your local merchants without having to lose the underlying assets. So there's a lot of options out there, but I think the important thing is if you have a merchant in your local neighborhood who accepts Bitcoin, let them know that you support them. Go buy a freaking $5 coffee. It's only $5 with Bitcoin. And if you're worried about the pizza problem, next time you buy some Bitcoin, add $5 on top of it, because you're going to buy the Bitcoin anyway for dollar cost averaging.
I think when I think about is Bitcoin good for payments question, it's not black and white. It's all these different scales. And in Australia, when you can pay pass for your coffee, you probably don't really need Bitcoin. But you ask the people that have got mountains of cash in Venezuela or Argentina, any of these countries, Bitcoin is a 10 out of 10 payment system and store of value for them. So it means different things to different people, and the number of people it's important to is going to only increase over time. Off the back, yeah.
I own a business and I'd like to accept crypto. Is there a directory that I can put my business on?
Yeah, so the company is Travel by Bit. If you want to accept crypto as a merchant, is the best one in Australia to contact.
Get your site listed on coinmap.org.
Yep.
Brad Garlias from Ripple is not only out there building relationships with banks, but he's also out there talking to the SEC, various governments around the world. Do you have any views on whether Ripple or SRP could become, the underpinned digital currency of, potentially currencies around the world? And also, do you have any views on when the SEC is finally going to regulate this market to a point where you see Ripple at the moment, the rest of the currencies have just pegged down, and Ripple seems to be manipulated?
Tough one. So personally, I've never been a big fan of Ripple, and my thought process has always been that banks aren't going to pay some cryptocurrency and buy all these tokens to use. The banks are going to issue their own, and sure enough, the other week we've seen JP Morgan, now we're going to see Facebook Coin, we're going to see Apple Coin. Every bank is going to launch their own for free. They're not going to buy $100 million of tokens to make some hodlers in the community rich that think they're buying the new banking system. Now that upsets a lot of people, but I just think that's the reality of the situation. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe they get lots of partnerships and lots of banks sign up to use and agree to buy lots of XRP. Even in that situation, if it's a good method of payment from going to A to B, you only need it for a split second to go from A to B. It's not like there's going to be heaps of people holding XRP as a store of value compared to Bitcoin or gold or other things. So that's just my thought process, but maybe I'll be...
You actually mentioned something really interesting in your question, was you interchangeably mentioned Ripple and XRP, and that's one big problem that XRP needs to overcome, because that's one of the biggest questions that the SEC has right now, determining whether or not XRP is indeed a security, whether or not that Ripple and XRP are separate or not. And that's a really big question, and right now there's a lot of legal precedent going on around that particular question, and if we do see it be a security, well, that's a whole different thing. But in terms of actually XRP as payments, there will be some banks that use it, without a doubt. I mean, you look at what SBI and the different banking networks that XRP is actually working with right now, or Ripple's working with to get them to use XRP Ledger, there's going to be some banks using XRP. And maybe they'll find a better solution, maybe they'll only use it for a few years, or maybe it'll be the solution that they want to use. But the competition is very strong. We see what Stellar Lumens did quite recently, where they're bringing in all these different stable coins, and that lets the banks be in control of their own stable coins, their own reserves, and pay tiny gas fees using Stellar Lumens. So there's potential that we could see a few different networks in the future, as SWIFT, of course, tries to remain relevant somehow. We have China launching their own SWIFT network, which Russia has just signed on to. And then, of course, Stellar Lumens with their stablecoin project. That's going to be very interesting, because IBM is a big backer of it, and they have a lot of banking partners. But XRP, we should not count out, because they have got a massive network of partners right now. And so, you know, as long as it doesn't get deemed as security, I think it'll surprise a lot of people, haters and not. So.
Yeah, I think we're so early on that speculation drives all these markets. So even if any of these projects aren't really used in the real world yet, that doesn't mean they're not going to go mental in another bull run as well. So yeah, at the moment speculation's running wild. Yeah.
So I have a question just in terms of, I just wanted your opinion on something. So we've seen like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're very much public-facing blockchains, and people can go and mine big data from these blockchains. So I'm thinking, the way I'm thinking for investment purposes, for a Facebook stablecoin, what do you think the level of information is out there? And Facebook is very much a behemoth. It's literally another government in terms of some of its functions. It can do, how it can regulate its data, how to get away with basically just having these apps and sharing passwords, etc. How do you think that the uptake will go with Facebook right now that Zuckerberg and Facebook are talking about their own native cryptocurrency? Given that they've already established this quite wide-reaching business network and platform for launching online businesses, I would say that literally mirrors something like Amazon or something like that, maybe a bit disconnected from eBay, but like it's just another platform where you can customize your client interaction, have some sort of shop front presence and branding behind the brand. How do you think that point is going to go, and how do you think the level of information in the broader Facebook community, which isn't us, it's basis, the majority of the Facebook community is not our demographic.
Yeah. So I think Facebook are going to call their coin a cryptocurrency and dress it up like that, but it's just another way for them to now extract all the data about our spending habits as well as everything else that we do. So I think the number of people that are waking up to this idea that they're being exploited for their data is increasing, but yeah, maybe 90% of people go through life pretty sheepish and they don't really care, but yeah, it's not going to be a true cryptocurrency with any sense of the word.
Do you think they're going to back it?
What was that?
I get back it.
Yeah, so I mean, the Facebook coin is supposed to be a stable coin, is what it comes down to, and it will probably be backed one for one, potentially. I think it will probably be fractional reserve banking like everyone else, because why the heck wouldn't they? Just print digital tokens. But I think the thing to remember about the Facebook coin is that it's coming from Facebook. This is a company that has been proven time and time again to be an actor who's in their own self-interest and not for the people who are supporting their platform. And there will be censorship. It will be a censorship probe coin, in complete contrast to Bitcoin. Now, there will be a lot of people who use the Facebook coin. Absolutely, they have a massive market of people. They're going to start integrating things like buying things within Facebook. That we know, moving to a third-party website, you see a pair of shoes and a promoted ad on Facebook, you can buy it immediately right there in a couple of clicks without having to leave Facebook. They're going to have this whole integrated platform, and that's good for Facebook, and it'll be good for a lot of users. But we have seen a move away from the privacy invading internet. Virtual private network usage is moving up all the time. More and more people are using VPNs. The same people who are aware of VPNs will be aware of things like Bitcoin, and they'll understand, at least on a basic level, the massive difference between something like Bitcoin, which is totally censorship-resistant money, free money, versus Facebook coin, which will be dictated by an unaccountable bureaucrats at Facebook.
Do you foresee a day that decentralized exchanges supersede centralized ones in volume and use?
Yeah, great question about DEXs, decentralized exchanges. So I think we'll always have centralized exchanges, particularly as that on-ramp to get money into the ecosystem. But once you're in the ecosystem, I think the things you're going to be able to do, Kyber is just one example of the wallets as well, being able to just click within a few buttons and maybe switch to a privacy coin. And if you're worried about your habits being tracked or whatnot, then you can switch back to another token to play that game, and it's all just going to happen through decentralized apps as well as the actual exchanges.
What's your favorite DEX?
Mr. Dark Oasis.
One of my favorites has got to definitely be, of course, Kybersoft. If you guys have not used Kyber, you definitely have to check it out. And I say that from someone who's used it a lot. And a massive thank you to you guys for sponsoring tonight. But I was happy to have them as a sponsor tonight because, oh my gosh, I love using it. And if I'm trading like Ethereum to Power Ledger or Elise Go or something like that, it's like 2 or 3 clicks and you're done. And it's compared to like IDEX, for example, very different. But you bring up an amazing question: is that everybody wants decentralized exchanges to happen, but one of the biggest things we miss is the fiat on-ramps with most of these decentralized. There's a couple that do have it, but they have their own issues or low liquidity or whatever it might be. I think that we are going to see a couple of those decentralized exchanges coming in the near future that can potentially challenge that volume issue, but I think in the future it's going to be essential that we do have decentralized exchanges that are at least top 10 exchanges at some point. Maybe Binance DEX, it's got its own issues once again, but it can definitely be one of those top exchanges, I think, right away. But so I look to Nash. So that's the Neon exchange. They've rebranded to Nash, but that's going to be, they've actually got registered to be an official security token that can be traded and listed on exchanges in Europe. I mean, it's going to be a big deal when it comes out. So that's definitely one to watch for in terms of a decentralized exchange.
Yeah, I think just about everyone would have used My Ether wallet, and Kyber is now integrated into that. So you just click on swap, and if you've got coins in your hardware wallet, you can swap them to another coin. So very easy.
Could we quickly talk to the role Bitcoin maximalists have to play in this whole revolution? Good question.
Yeah, so I tweeted about this the other day and it got a fair bit of traction. That I think it's just unhealthy, and it's, if you're a Bitcoin maximalist and they're saying that every other coin and project is shit, you're being disrespectful to every person that was at the Ethereum conference today. Hundreds of teams, thousands of individuals. There's thousands of coins out there now, and some of them are being used in the real world. So it's just blatantly wrong to say that everyone else is a shitcoin that's not going to be used. It's already being used. So it's pretty toxic, and unfortunately there's a lot of them still going around.
Basically agree with everything you just said there, is that there's so much being built, and it's very myopic, and unfortunately it's the same as any kind of extremist ideology. It just it's not in tune with reality. And I love Bitcoin. Bitcoin's amazing, but it's not the only coin in existence. It's not the only coin doing anything relevant. So, Bitcoin maximalists, I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with where they're coming from, and I don't support their myopic point of view, but they're there. So, part of the community, love them or hate them.
Do you think the development pace for second layer solutions like Lightning Network is fast enough to keep up with the rising fees? I mean, like in the last bull market, the average fees exceeded $100.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so Segwit has made quite a big difference, and I think the next hard fork will be Snore signatures, which will improve about another 25 or 30%. So there's these sort of stepping up that are going to meet the demand each time. We've seen the capacity of the Lightning Network go from 0 to 1,000 channels, a couple $1 million, I think now. Really friendly wallet of Satoshi. If you haven't downloaded that app, it is the easiest Lightning wallet app to use, and you can use it anywhere in Australia, any of the travel by big stores. You can pay for your coffee with the Lightning Network. So yeah, Bitcoin is taking a slow and steady approach rather than Ethereum and other projects that are trying to break new ground and be different. So I know it's frustrating at times, but there's $100 billion at stake, and if Bitcoin do something and it breaks, there's going to be a lot of upset people.
Nah, I think you got that.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Question for Lark. Is there any timeline for Ethereum proof of stake?
What's that?
Ethereum proof of stake. Was there any timeline mentioned earlier?
Was there any time limit mentioned for the Ethereum proof of stake? I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that it's going to come when it comes. And that sounds like a terrible answer, but that's the reality of the answer, basically, that Ethereum has been kind of touting around. I mean, what we're looking at now, what was mentioned at the conference, was that by the end of the year, there'll be plans for, actually running the sort of test nets and things with the full proof of stake implementation next year. But you guys know how technology works. None of these dates are certainly hard and fast. And I think one of the real things about Ethereum proof of stake is the worry that they're going to not do it fast enough. Is it not going to happen in time, and therefore is, Tron going to be the new thing, right? The Troning is upon us. It's coming. Well, the reality is that Tron and EOS and other blockchains are there right now eating Ethereum's lunch while Ethereum is working on the scalability issues. But at the same time, we do have to realize how stupidly early we are to this whole game. I mean, in 5 years, when Ethereum has proof of stake, I mean, it's not to say it's going to take 5 years, maybe it takes 2 years for them to get the full implementation of proof of stake, and Cardano comes out, and all these other blockchains are fully operational, and Tezos has all the things that it needs to operate in a fully functional way. We're still going to be early in 5 years. By 2030, we're going to have trillions of dollars which are coming to the crypto industry, and we're still going to be like the early 2000s of the internet by that point. So, in terms of adoption and scale. So we have a long way to go, and I am fully confident that Ethereum is going to get to do what they're planning to do, but yeah, it's not happening by the end of the year.
Hands up, who knew that Ethereum is launching a new chain? Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty new. We actually did a video about it last week, but Ethereum are launching an entirely new chain to do proof of stake, and then they'll have the old chain, and they're still tinkering with exactly how that's going to work. But very, very new stuff.
So I hear it's 32 Ethereum you need. Is that right?
Yeah, so once Ethereum launches the new chain, you'll be able to migrate your Ethereum from the current chain to the new chain, and if you have 32 Ethereum, you'll be able to stake and start to validate transactions and earn fees just like you do on other proof of stake chains at the moment.
It's the side chain.
No, not a side chain exactly.
Second layer solution essentially. Is that what you mean?
No, they're calling it a beacon chain, so they're going to have a new chain, and then the old chain, they're not sure what they're going to do with the old chain.
We're still in like uncharted waters with a lot of this.
Yeah, great.
This is more of a statement than a question, but I can answer.
For sure.
Every day, or just about every day, I write to President Trump. I do. And he tagged my tweet the other day. I asked for vacancy from Ross Ulbricht all the time. I also asked him to get rid of the Federal Reserve. And I asked him to bring in Bitcoin or crypto for the future. He's a different animal than any other past president. And I think he's going to adopt this. So don't give up. I think he's going to bring in
So the question was about a gentleman who's been tweeting Donald Trump asking him to free Ross Ulbricht, get rid of the Fed, and adopt Bitcoin. Do we think that's going to happen? So I don't think that Bitcoin is going to get readily adopted by any of these countries that are fighting tooth and nail to swap the baton as they debase their own currencies between the G20 nations. So that is the real battle. When Bitcoin starts to get to that market share of maybe 10% where it becomes a real competitor, that's when we're going to see all sorts of FUD in the news and headlines about why it's so bad, and that's when the real war sort of heats up for a freer system, I believe. But Lark's the political man, so I'll let you answer this.
Well, no. I don't think that, I would hope for the first one that he would pardon Ross Ulbricht, because it's ridiculous. I mean, the man was a pioneer in terms of building a website, and the entire idea of criminalization of drugs is crazy. Decriminalize or legalize some of them, that's a whole different issue, but he should definitely be pardoned, without a doubt. Now, in terms
The story is Schumer lost his Bitcoin because of
In terms of Trump actually bringing in Bitcoin in any kind of level in the United States, I also don't see that happening. But it'd be amazing if the U.S. was to adopt Bitcoin in some kind of way. But I mean, I think it's probably going to be one of the last countries, considering the SEC, considering the CFTC, considering the power of Wall Street, and we see what happens in New York too, and so it's highly problematic without a doubt. But I mean, I would look actually to the smaller countries, looking for some country to start adopting Bitcoin or actually adding it as a reserve currency. Look to the small countries first. Look for something like Switzerland, or I mean, not Japan's small, but look for something like Japan or Argentina. Any of these countries would be much more likely candidates to actually take some kind of steps towards adoption, or the refugees from the global financial system, or countries like Iran or countries like Russia, who are being actively pushed out of the global financial system.
I think it's Sweden. Sweden now is allowing employers to pay employees. Maybe.
I haven't heard that one.
Sweden or Switzerland?
Switzerland, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so when it comes to mass adoption, do you think it needs to be a balance between anonymity and privacy, and also KYC, AML, and also accountability? Is that be a balance to make this all work within governments? For governments to actually accept this and merge this all together, which I think is going to be a merge. It's not going to be a separate side. What's your take on that?
I think we're going to see a war on cash in the next few years, even in countries like Australia, as they start to have to push negative interest rates around. So I think all these ideas are going to be more discussed in the general public about, hold on, cash has been banned, all of a sudden everything's being tracked. So I think these issues are going to be hotly debated going forward. I think bad people do bad things, and there's lots of bad actors that use VPNs, and we still have the FBI and the CIA have the means to catch bad people. So just because people have anonymous money, I don't think that necessarily means that. I really think it's overblown, the protection versus the spying.
Yeah, I think just the difference between the privacy and being anonymous is there is a difference there. And I think when it comes to this adoption and big corporations that are backed by governments and within sovereign states, they will need that sort of backing from the government to say, yes, we will go down this road, but there might need to be some sort of point where there's a balance of still having privacy, but accountability.
There's a few different things that we can unpack there, and one is something like Monero, which basically enables private transactions that are working on hiding your internet traffic, so that if someone's looking in, they don't even know that you're using the Monero network. But when we look at corporate privacy, for example, that's a really important question, and that's definitely something that's being worked on in terms of how can you hide to the general public what's going on, but still have that verification or that proof for the tax man, right? And that is definitely being worked on. A lot of STO platforms that are currently in operation are working on how you can hide it from the general public, or at least sort of obfuscate so it's not immediately visible, and then of course allow for proof that these things exist and proof that you have them. So that's definitely a part of the conversation with people like Dusk or Own Network and things like this. They're working on how you actually make that happen. So you're right, it's a very important part of the question, and that privacy aspect in terms of keeping things public versus private, especially with corporations, is very important. And then privacy going from peer to peer is a totally different equation in terms of something like Monero.
We have two more questions, guys, and then we'll get into the bar tab.
I just wanted to hear your thoughts on IEOs and how long you think it will be the main fundraising model for projects, or if you think it will transition to mainly being SPOs, or as the market comes back up, it will transition back towards companies just growing their own.
So I actually think a lot of the IEO hype has already died off, and for those that don't know what we're talking about exchanges running the fundraising, ICOs basically. So I think a lot of that hype has already died off, and all of the IEOs are down substantially from when they first listed, but they're still up from the raising. And I think now that finance kind of had an exclusivity, didn't they? And now everyone else is doing it, and there's not that many good ideas out there. We pretty much wore out every industry in the ICO phase. So yeah, I just see it being a bit of a fad. And actually long term, I think that STO is going to turn out to be a big letdown for a lot of people. It's not going to be a big hype cycle and get crazy. It's going to all happen very slowly behind closed doors. And I think we're going to see a swing back to ICOs. That one of the things we're already working on with the government is how to put standards in place for consumer protection. So just because someone's doing an ICO doesn't mean it can't be a fantastic project. Every project, Fiverr and Maker, they all started off before the hype as good projects that wanted to do something in a decentralised manner. So yeah, I think the pendulum is going to swing back eventually, and people are becoming more critical already, I think.
One thing that's really interesting with the IEO boom right now that's I think not really getting discussed very much, but is an incredibly salient point, is there's not actually very many new projects that are coming in the IEO boom. We're seeing a lot of listings, but almost every single project that I've seen come to IEO had a raise a year ago, 8 months ago. I mean, Block Cloud and Anchor and all these different projects, they did private sales, and then they were going to do an ICO like 8 months ago, and then they decided not to because the market started turning. And so there's been a lot of these projects that just delayed. So we don't actually have a lot of new projects announcing right now. So I think you're absolutely right in this house. We're absolutely going to kind of fizzle out, and it's going to fizzle out very quickly because every exchange, I mean, I saw 4 new IEO listings on 4 different exchanges yesterday. And that's ridiculous. And it's going to burn out very quickly because there's no new projects coming in. We're seeing old projects which are finally listing in order to get that hype, because the market has recovered to some extent. But yeah, the long-term viability of what we're seeing right now, maybe a flash in the pan, but if we do see a lot of new projects that have been building over the past 8 months start announcing, well, that could actually continue that momentum moving forward. But we actually see the projects announcing. We haven't seen any yet. All I've seen is old projects which have delayed indefinitely their ICOs, taking advantage of the current market situation. But overall, the IEO is not a terrible idea. It does provide some amount of safety for investors looking to actually get into ICOs. I mean, how many scams have we seen with ICO investing when we actually have to send our transactions across the Ethereum network? But then again, we come back to centralization and trust in these gatekeepers who are charging giant fees. So it is what it is.
Reduces the costs for those companies to actually run the ICO by just using one common system. So you don't have to recreate the infrastructure or format. A lot of ICOs had a lot of problems running, and by launching on the IEO, it seems that sort of solves a lot of those problems. You've got established large companies just using the same system over and over again, and it also allows them to sort of bring in, while they're not regulations, it's internally regulated, it's still a little bit more clarity about the process. They're not going to, the big exchanges aren't going to run scams on this.
100%. There's a reputation basis there. For anyone who didn't hear that, he was saying that for a company to launch, the actual IEO can be much less in terms of cost. So, but you have to remember, I mean, someone like Binance might charge, $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million for that actual IEO listing. So there is that cost, but traditionally ICOs cost a stupid amount of money to run because you have to pay per person for the KYC that you do. You have to pay marketing firms, you have to pay security firms, and all these different things. So it's historically been a very tricky thing. So
Peter wanted to ask a question.
Peter?
Two-part question. Given that IOHK is so detailed and meticulous and scientific in everything they do, when do you see IOHK, when do you see Cardano in next 10 years, 5 years, 10 years? And the second part, is Charles Hoskinson Satoshi Nakamoto?
I think the platform war is kind of, it's fizzled down a little bit in crypto winter, but Ethereum has a few years head start, and a lot of people get upset when I say that. But Neo was the Chinese Ethereum, and if you watch the Neo conference the other day, they said that they're 2 years behind schedule, basically. And then we've got NEM was the next big thing, and then it was EOS, and Cardano. So they're all sort of buying, and I'm sure that they are going to capture some market share off Ethereum. But yeah, peer review is a good process to have, but if these other platforms are bug-free, are people necessarily going to jump over to something just because it's peer reviewed? I'm not sure, but I think it's good that they're taking a different approach.
I think with Cardano, it's going to surprise a lot of people, and there's a lot of blockchains that are competing in the same space, but I don't see Cardano getting knocked out of the top 100 or something like that. We have seen some, projects come up and they get to number 20 or 25 and then they disappear 2 weeks later and never come back. I think Cardano is, when it gets up there, is going to be one of the major competitor platforms, if, of course, they can deliver on everything they want. So looking at the team, looking at what they're doing and what they've built so far, I think they will be able to deliver on that vision, and I think that we're going to see a kind of rivalry happening over the next 10 years where it's kind of in that way that, Apple and Microsoft were kind of competing with each other. It could be Cardano and Ethereum, and look, maybe one of the other platforms we have a new dynamic in terms of the way we understand these kind of competitions, but it doesn't have to be a competition necessarily, because the reality is the potential market is so ridiculously big that there's plenty of market share for everybody to get involved. And is Charles Hoskinson Satoshi Nakamoto? Well, if he is, he's definitely smart enough not to say it.
Thanks, guys. Fantastic questions. We want to have one more? Why not?
One more. Just in terms of blockchain being like a massive technology in the next 10 years, are you seeing any standouts? There's a lot of individual blockchain developers. Are you seeing any standout companies? And can you name, say, the top 3 blockchain development companies in the world? Are there any that stand out?
As in, so not individual projects or individual blockchains?
Just development companies that develop in blockchain.
I'd say consensus right on the top list, without a doubt. Yeah, so interesting question. This is the thing, there's a lot of, we have the blockchains themselves from the open public networks, and then of course we have the firms behind them developing them. And we can see with Ethereum, for example, consensus, I would say, is the faraway leader in terms of actually getting there, developing this blockchain, making projects happen on top of Ethereum, right? They're dedicated to Ethereum, but at the same time, IOHK gets very often confused with Cardano, but we have to remember that IOHK is actually the development firm behind Cardano, and they're the ones who are building the blockchain and making it happen. We see a lot of big companies like this. We have quite a few in Korea, actually. The Icon Loop, which is the parent company, which is the ones building it. We have Blocko, which is currently building Argo. So there's some really amazing blockchain companies that are doing public networks, but they're also doing a lot of stuff on a private way with governments and corporations and stuff like this. So very interesting question too.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's a standout just yet, and people are pretty opposed to some of them, like Blockstream and these companies that are working on specific things. But yeah, we'll see. Well, anyway, guys, thanks so much for the questions. Grab a drink, come say good day to us, and make sure you meet someone new tonight. Remember when you went to your first crypto meetup? And I think we've got a couple of giveaways.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to be giving 6 Edcoin gift cards to James from Alpha Wallet, and so if you guys download Alpha Wallet, you guys can go to him and get a gift card from him. So each gift card is worth $5 USD. I'm going to give the last 6 to Jocelyn from MakerDAO. Go to her and learn about Maker, and I'm going to give the last 6 to Jackson from Synthetics. So yeah, Jackson, please come look at me. I can't find you. Yeah, so you guys please go learn about all these other partners, and thank you, Alex, Dan, for talking to you. Have a good evening, guys.
I don't know.
other guy who spoke besides Lark. The other guy. Yeah, hey. How's it going? I didn't